guys, this is Checka. I am here at the Ledyard Canoe Club in Hanover, New Hampshire, where Dartmouth College is, and I am standing in front of this beautiful, huge canoe in the Connecticut River, and across the river you can see the state of Vermont. Now I'm here to talk to you about one of my favorite Dartmouth alums, this man named John Ledyard, who went to school here in the 1700s, and the school was brand new. And he is famous around here for building a canoe, not too different from this one, a pitch pine canoe, and getting onto that river and running away from school. He got onto that river, he sailed all the way out to the Atlantic Ocean. And Robert Frost, the poet, later referred to him as the patron saint of freshmen who run away. And if you can believe it, that's not either the craziest or the longest journey that John Ledyard ever did. He actually went on to sail the whole world, to sail with pirates, to search for Timbuktu. He had this crazy, crazy life. But why don't we back up a little bit and see where he started out? Because he started out very normal small town in Connecticut, back when Connecticut was still a colony, and he had tragedy early in his life. His dad, who was a sea captain, died. So he was brought up by his mom and his super overbearing grandfather, who's called the Colonel. And the Colonel thought that, all of his grandchildren should have apprenticeships and trades and careers. And from the time that he was a little kid, John Ledyard exhibited some of the qualities that gave him such an adventurous life. He was a dreamer. He was not practical at all. When he was a kid, and his grandfather wanted him to study and be an apprentice, he used to organize his cousins to go look for Spanish gold around their hometown. When he got old enough to be an apprentice, he failed at all of them. He was a terrible lawyer's apprentice. He was a terrible clerk. So his grandfather thought that instead, maybe the solution is that he should go to college. So that's how he ended up at Dartmouth. So Dartmouth at the time was run by a really, really strict, old-style Puritan preacher named Eleazar Wheelock. And Eleazar Wheelock had this idea that the best thing for young men is to, Native American young men, colonists, white colonist young men, to have to hack it out in the wilderness and, study hard. That's why he founded Dartmouth College, to do this. So John Ledyard arrives here, and you would think, man, if he's going out to this hardcore, out in the woods, fight the wolves college, that he has all these supplies. Instead, he took all of the money that was supposed to pay for school, and he spent it on the 1700s equivalent of a sports car, except it was a carriage with horses. And he bought all of these silk clothes because he wanted to start a theatrical society. That's why he ran away, is because he had spent all the money for tuition. So when he runs away, he goes on the first of his many voyages. He's still a teenager at the time. He gets on a ship. It's a merchant marine ship, and he ends up sailing for several years, sees lots of places. He comes back. His family is still kind of mad. So he signed up to sail with Captain Cook. And you may not know the name Captain Cook, but he's one of the most famous and exciting explorers that ever lived. Captain Cook did 4 voyages, and he traveled around the world. He went farther north, farther south than anybody had ever been. He went to countries that had been basically unexplored by Europeans. He was just an incredible guy. And there had been a tradition of sort of wealthy naturalists that would sail with him and, take different specimens of trees, flora and fauna, animals and plants that people had never seen before and make notes. But those people are usually wealthy. And John Ledyard, when he sailed with them, he was just a normal guy. He was an American who was a sailor. But he did keep a journal, just like these other guys. And he used some of the things that he had learned from his Native American classmates at Dartmouth to make observations about the way that people spoke in different parts of the world. So while he was sailing with Captain Cook, they went to what is now we think of as Oregon, but back then it's a totally unexplored part of North America. Is the far, far western part. And they got furs, and they went up to really, really, really cold Arctic, where they needed the furs. But when they sailed further around and went to China, they sold them, and they sold them for vast amounts of money. China didn't even have a trade with the West. This is a huge, huge, huge deal. Unfortunately, the voyage ended because Captain Cook gets possibly eaten, possibly just attacked in Hawaii. But in any case, he died there, and John Ledyard was one of the only witnesses. So the famous Captain Cook dies, everybody's very sad, the voyage ends. Ledyard goes back to his hometown, and he is so proud of himself because he has had this 4-year-long adventure and sailed with the most famous explorer of the entire world. His family, not proud. That is because while he was gone, the American Revolution happened. So he was so proud of sailing with Captain Cook, but for his family, that means that he spent 4 years sailing for the British Navy while they are fighting against the British. So if you go to Connecticut today, you can go to the town of Ledyard, Connecticut, but it is not named for him. It's named for the cousins that fought against the British. So once again, family disapproval, it's a bad deal. But he did take time, this is important, to write out his journals and get them published. So he, by this time, he doesn't look like another American. He looks like an adventurer. He had crazy long hair. He had gotten tattooed in Tahiti. He was very muscular. I mean, he looked like a world explorer, is what he was. And he gets bored. He finishes a journal, he gets bored, and he decides that what he is going to do is the thing that kind of happened on purpose with the furs, he's going to do it on purpose. So he decides he's going to raise up money and go and find John Paul Jones, who's another super famous, Navy man, and they are going to go to the western coast of North America, where really nobody has been except for Cook and the Russians. They're going to get furs. They're going to go to China. So he goes off to Europe. He goes to France, and immediately, this is a terrible idea. John Paul Jones is not interested. Nobody wants to give him a ship or money because he's never been a captain before. He's only been a sailor. So he hangs out with the only Americans that he knows in Paris. If you know anything about American history, in the 1700s, the main American guy in Paris is Thomas Jefferson. So he used to have dinner at Thomas Jefferson's house with the Marquis de Lafayette, and they loved to hear about these adventures. And Jefferson was especially curious to know what is on the other side of the North American continent. And Ledyard kept telling him, we should go there, because if we don't, the Russians are going to go there. It's important for later. So he gives up on this idea that he's going to go take the ship. And then he decides he is going to circumambulate. Now you might have heard of Magellan and circum, like a circle, navigate. Circumambulate means that you are going to walk. So he decides that he is going to walk across Europe, go into Russia, walk all the way through Siberia, get to the Bering Strait, hitch a ride over, and then walk down what is now Canada, basically where Alaska is, walk all the way down, and then walk the entire breadth of North America east, and then end up in Connecticut. He thinks that this is a practical idea. And the crazy thing is, he almost does it. Jefferson and the Marquis de Lafayette give him some money. He does not spend it on supplies. We already know he's kind of a terrible planner. But they can't get him a passport into Russia, which I think it's just an interesting thing to think about. For us, Jefferson is such a big deal, but in the 1700s, he was the leader of a tiny new country. He couldn't even get a passport for a friend. But Ledyard is whatever, I don't even care. He goes into Russia without the passport. He just starts walking, and he sets out in winter. So he walks through Scandinavia, through Russia, and everywhere he goes, in these little tiny villages, people are fascinated because he is just a really strange looking person. But it also means that people pay attention, and the rumors start going back to the Russian capital. There's this crazy guy there. So he walks and walks and walks and walks and walks. And when he gets to the farthest reaches of Yakutsk and Irkutsk, a really nutty thing happens. He runs into his friends from the ship, from the Cook voyage. And they have this, "What are you doing here? No, man, what are you doing here?" And they join forces because sailing with Captain Cook meant that you kind of entered into a brotherhood because there were so few people who could relate to the experiences he had. So he joins up with these guys, they walk some, he gets almost to where he wants to go, arrested, Catherine the Great, who is the leader of Russia, has heard about him. She thinks that he's a Russian spy, so she has him arrested. He is arrested by Cossacks on horses. They stick him on a sledge, and they take him all the way through Russia and just drop him off, like literally drop him off at the border of Poland. So now he had to walk back through Europe, this time through the West. But he doesn't go to France, he goes to England. And that means that he is no longer friends with Thomas Jefferson. Because you know who Thomas Jefferson does not like? The British. Not so much into the British. So he goes into England, and again, he gets lots of attention because he's this adventurer, he looks crazy, whatever. And he was also a really good storyteller. So basically, every time he would go into like a little English village and go to the pub, people would immediately invite him over to their houses, and they loved him. So rumors start to get back, but one of the most important naturalists of the 1700s, Sir Joseph Banks. So Sir Joseph Banks, he was kind of the guy to know. If you had any kind of scientific project or exploration project, he had sailed with Captain Cook on the first voyage. And he's the guy. He basically started Kew Gardens in England from his personal collection, close personal friends with King George III. Good guy to know. So Sir Joseph Banks invites him to London. And Ledyard goes to London. The two of them hit it off, and Sir Joseph Banks tells him, you know what, I have a project for you. And he did. At the time, they were trying to find Timbuktu. So Timbuktu is a city that was very famous for being mysterious and possibly filled with riches. It's a whole long story behind this. But basically, they really wanted to know where Timbuktu was and where the source of the Nile River was. So Sir Joseph Banks thought that Ledyard, would be the perfect person to go for this. So he gives them supplies, money, sends them off, and Ledyard gets to travel to Africa in the ship of a Barbary pirate, which is awesome, because when he was a kid growing up in Connecticut, he had dressed up like a Barbary pirate. So he gets to Africa, he goes to Egypt, he goes to Cairo to, get maps and supplies and whatever, and while he's there, he gets sick, he gets a stomach ache, and in the 1700s, one of the medicines that people would take for stomach aches is actually a poison. So he poisoned himself from the medicine and died. So he died in Cairo. And if you think about this guy, judging him from the things he set out to do and accomplish, he looks like a failure. But if you think about the things that he accomplished, he walked on his own thousands of miles. He saw people and places and cultures, that very, very few people in the world saw. And mostly pretty respectfully. He was a very curious person. What he did not know is that those journals that he left about Cook's voyage became famous. They became widely published. And even though they are not famous to us, they were very famous for the generation that came after him. So there was a whole generation of young guys, especially in the 1800s, who read his stories about adventure and romance, and it really inspired him. So not only does he inspire Robert Frost, who, as I said, also was a student here, he also comes up in Moby Dick, which is one of the most famous novels in the world. If you read Thoreau mentions him. So if you have a crazy dream in your heart, this is a good guy to know. Also, I think he's nuts. I do not think you should pattern your life after him, but if you do, I hope you keep a really, really good journal, and I'm reading it.